So today we're going to be taking a look at One Piece chapter 1090. This one's called Admiral Kizaru. Now, first thing I'm going to do is actually going to take a look at the cover art for this. Now, this one was a fan request. It is quite interesting though. It does show Captain Kuro sitting on a window of some sort of house or a cottage just reading a book. You can see some black cats with him. It's quite fun. I believe his group was called the Black Cat Pirates, but I could be wrong about that. Now, we haven't actually seen anything from Captain Kuro since the Silver Village arc. I don't know whether Oda's hinting at a return, although this is a fan request, so you can never be sure. But I thought I'd just make a note of that anyway. But without any further ado, we're going to move on to the chapters. In the first panel, we actually see Luffy speaking to the Gorosei. Now, in typical Luffy fashion, he announces himself as Monkey D. Luffy, the man who will become the Pirate King. There is actually someone in the background that shouts at him saying, "What are you doing, Luffy?" It will be interesting once the anime adaptation comes along to see who that is. But the next panel anyway is more of a zoom out of Egghead Island. You can see all the marine ships in the navy, and Luffy's continuing to shout at them, basically saying, "We're in an alliance with Dr. Vegapunk. If you do care about York's safety, then just withdraw the fleet." And then you can even see York screaming, saying, "Save me!" It then cuts to the Gorosei actually speaking back to Luffy, and one of them saying to him, basically, "You're Straw Hat Luffy, aren't you?" And they're asking him how many people are with him in the Elaborate phase right now. Now, Luffy is actually about to answer them, but before he does, someone interrupts them, saying, "Don't say anything, Luffy," and hang up. Now, we can actually see that this is Nico Robin, because in the small snippet, one of them, Gorosei, actually does say, that woman's voice was Nico Robin, wasn't it? The next bit does show Robin talking to Luffy and basically telling him you don't want to give him too much information because you don't want them to learn too much about us. Luffy does say, "You're right, my bad. I just wanted to make them basically withdraw the fleet." Turned tail and ran, but Usopp shouts at him, like hell that's going to happen. I mean, don't underestimate the Marines. There is a panel of Kizaru as well, and he seems just quite shocked, really, doesn't know what to say. It does show another one of a couple of Marines looking all shocked and scared, holding their guns, basically saying that how low can these pirates really sink? They really are as evil as the rumours say. Now, we get another cut to the World Economic Journal headquarters, and we can see Vivi and Wapo, and as well Big News Morgan, who was actually listening on the whole conversation. He's saying, "What the bloody hell have I just heard? What's going on over there?" Vivi even is going, "Luffy-san, what the hell?" Now, this is really interesting, because it does mean that Big News Morgan's probably quite close. He might actually perhaps be able to save them. Maybe he can airlift them out. His ship does fly, and this could mean that Vivi gets to meet with Luffy again, and perhaps she'll even join the crew for official. Maybe she goes with him and stays with him, but of course we don't know for now. We'll just have to wait and see how that ends up. Then we also have a panel of Jay Garcia Saturn saying that basically there's three main things we have to protect. The first thing being the physical safety of York, the second being the Punk records, which is basically just a record of Vegapunk's brain and all his knowledge and stuff like that, and the third thing being the power plant that's used to produce the Mother Flame. Everything else essentially can be lost except for those things. And then we see Admiral Doberman come in, who sort of questions him on this and basically says that, but Sir Rob Lucci is still there, along with some of the Cypher Pole agents. And he basically just says to him that this is basically just a worst case scenario. It's important that we protect the things that are most important to us. And Doberman sort of puts his head down, is just like, "Yeah, okay, understood." Then we do get this eerie scene after where Jay Garcia looks at him and basically just says, "Humans are no different from insects. Even if the numbers reduce, they'll just multiply again." And again, Doberman just unable to say anything with his head down, just like, "Yes, sir." And then we do jump back to Egghead Island, where Nami's whacked York right in the head with a climb attack, and she's got a big lump on her head, and just saying, "Wow, bloody hell, that hurts. You're going to pay for that." When the five elders are going to hear about this, someone in the back just says, "Go on, complain, whatever, we don't care." And Robin's actually trying to calm Nami down, saying, "She's unarmed, calm down." And Chopper then asks Robin if her wounds are actually feeling any better. Then we jump to this big panel now. I really like this one. It's quite a big panel. There's a lot to unpack here. In the middle, we can see Vegapunk sort of just standing there. Looks like he's got his things. I don't know if he's packed up, ready to go. Chopper's in the back there with Robin, and Robin says, "Yes, thank you." Chopper, in typical fashion, gets embarrassed. Says, "Oh, bloody hell, don't talk to me like that." We can actually see Nami still poking York in the head with a stick. Zoro's behind her there as well. Now up at the front we can see Luffy and Bonnie typically stuffing their faces. We can actually as well, even in the back, see Kaku still lying down there, bloody hurt, and Lucci sitting in the corner. Now Kaku's just really disappointed with himself, basically saying that even though he did face 2 of the Seraphim, he's still really ashamed of them. And Rob Lucci's actually quite comforting in this, saying, look, I know how you feel, just forget about it and get some rest. But this is, I really like this bit. This is probably my favourite scene from the manga. There's just so much going on here. Then we can see, I believe it's actually Lucci talking here, where he's talking about basically the state of the satellites, saying that 4 of them are heavily injured, 2 of them are dead. And then he says, and as for the Straw Hat crew as well. But then he's actually interrupted by Kaku, who says, what are you whispering about over there? And he just said, nothing, just talking to myself. Now, this is quite amazing to show how much loyalty he has in that situation amongst all those pirates, all those strong players. And he's still trying to get messages back to the Marines. Then we see Usopp actually asking basically everyone down there if they're all alright, and it basically cuts to another big panel of a bunch of them all eating and drinking, and looks like they're being merry, but then they're also, some of them are crying as well, and they're basically saying, the Straw Hat crew, thanks for all this food, you know, we owe you our lives. And then one of them saying, don't call them out, they're still our enemies. And they're saying, you know, that we're saved, thank you, and seem quite grateful, but then they're also torn because these people have helped them, but then these people are their enemies as well. So I think they're in a situation where they don't really know how to act. And then he asks them about the Seraphims, basically saying, well, aren't the Seraphims your allies? And they're like, well, yeah, they are. But what if they get out of control again? And then he sort of asks Vegapunk, like, can you assure their safety? And he says, of course, those bubbles are made from the same bubbles of the Pacifista Mark IIIs, essentially. They're really safe. There's no way they're getting out of them. Now, we cut to another panel of basically showing all of the Pacifistas, not the Pacifistas, the Seraphim, sorry, in their bubbles. And he's saying that basically the bubbles are even bomb resistant. It's made with the same properties of Sea Prism Stone, which I guess is insinuating as well that devil fruits aren't going to work against them. Which, yeah, it actually does here, because it says it makes the weapons effective against devil fruit users. And we can see a bunch of them in there. Basically, Jinbei, the Jinbei Seraphim looking one, doesn't seem that bothered. Neither does the Kuma one. The Mihawk looking Seraphim seems quite annoyed, basically saying, like, how dare you lock us in here? Then we see a little panel of the other Seraphim as well. The, what's her name? It slipped my mind now. Bloody hell. The Boa Hancock one. And she's basically saying that you don't have to worry about us since we didn't receive any orders to eliminate you. You got no concern, basically. And they're like, oh, well, okay then, that's a relief. But they do say, even so, we're still grateful to you, Snake. Thank you for doing, well, not doing, thank you for undoing the petrification. She says, that's strange. I don't remember programming her to act like that. That was Vegapunk that said that. Then we see the cut of Luffy basically asking her, and she does call her Hancock as well in this way, and says that, look, these are my comrades, you have to undo the powers on them, please, you're the only one that can save them. And then she sort of blushes, and you can see the heart there, and she's like, okay, I will do, please stop staring directly at my eyes. Now, Jinbei finds this hilarious. You know, you can see him laughing there, basically saying that he is a perfect copy of Hancock. Even the way she sort of acts around Luffy is just the same way that the real Hancock does. Now, this is strange here as well, because it's sort of, I think Vegapunk was a bit confused about this as well. He seems it's quite interesting to see these emotions. Now, he's saying that basically they're considered to be one of the pieces of information transferred through the lineage factor during the cloning process, which I don't think he was 100% sure on how that had worked out originally himself, which does make me think then perhaps the other Seraphims have sort of retained some of themselves as well, and maybe similar also, which does make me think with stuff like the Jinbei Seraphim, if they could possibly break their control and end up siding with them. Then we see Luffy again talking to the Hancock Seraphim through some sort of transponder snail telly looking thing. And he's basically saying, thank you again, Hancock, and she just blushing, saying, did you just say that you love me? And this is typical Boa Hancock fashion, just how she'd act around Luffy. And we actually see Vegapunk talking with one of his clones as well, Stella, and basically saying that although the comm systems are working again, they still can't open the Frontier Dome. And Vegapunk's basically saying that, well, we can't escape if we can't disable the barrier anyway. Then you see York on the ground again, sort of smirking and laughing a bit, saying it's useless, I've locked everything behind a password. And the bad news is that he didn't share the info with the other guys, so it's not put into their brain, so there's no way that basically they can figure it out themselves either. Then one of them jumps on her and says, you're starting to get on my nerves, basically ready to pound her again. And she's just laughing at them, saying that basically the password and the world government are the two things protecting her right now. And she's even saying that she's starting to get hungry. And you can see one of them in the background basically getting pissed off at her, being like, bloody hell, why you? Then we see Stussy talking, basically saying that, look, we're surrounded from every side, Stella. The fleet comprises more than 100 ships and nearly 30,000 marines on board. And then Sanji just being infatuated with her is like, yeah, we have a dire situation on our hands, but do you want a cup of coffee, Stussy? And then Vegapunk as well is talking, basically saying that you said your name was Nami, right? You're the navigator of the crew? And she says, yeah, I am. And he says the log post isn't pointing to a new destination yet, but he thinks that they can still follow the other directions it recorded in Wano. Now this is big, this panel here. He's basically saying that, well, Nami is saying that one of them's pointing northeast from it, and Vegapunk goes, yeah, that's where Elbaf is. Instantly, we can see Luffy and Usopp as well, just their jaws dropped. They're shocked, seeing Elbaf. Are we actually finally going there? I mean, we've been dreaming of going there ever since. It's the Island of Giants. I mean, they're just so excited. So am I. It's been ages since we've seen more action from the Giants. Now we're actually going to get to go to Elbaf soon by the looks of it. I mean, I just can't wait to see the Elbaf arc kick off. It's going to be so good. One of them's basically saying in the next panel that Elbaf, are you sure? I mean, it's quite big. The people there are quite big too, and obviously it's the Island of Giants. Everybody there, giants. And then one of them's actually saying to Rob, would you stop staring at me? We can see him there in the corner staring sort of disapprovingly at them. Then in the middle we can see Vegapunk talking, and he's basically saying that, look, luckily for us, your ship is already on the Labophase stratum. Since the island is completely surrounded by a marine blockade, it's possible for them to escape from the coast. Then we sort of see a top-down view of the island as he's talking, and he's saying basically that we have to go northeast to the other side of the island, and fortunately for them, the Vega Force number 1 is already stationed next to the ship, and he basically says that I hope it will carry us all the way through the marine blockade, but it can only fly within the airfield of Egghead. Basically it'll fall down as soon as it leaves the airfield range of the island. And Frankie obviously says that nah, that ain't a problem. The Sunny can take over from there as long as we can sort of get that far. The Sunny's able to completely get out and get away from the range of the Marines. Frankie then says in the next panel that basically no one's going to be able to get after us. No one's going to be able to chase us once we've flown a kilometre away. And Vegapunk's quite surprised by this, saying, my word, a ship that can fly a straight full kilometre? Bloody hell, yeah, let's go with that plan. And Frankie says it's powered by Cola. And then he's shocked. He's like, Cola? I think he was really surprised. I think Frankie's quite impressed him with his sort of engineering skills and knowledge. It's definitely piqued Vegapunk here. Then there's another panel as well with one of the Vegapunks saying that basically that is a very well thought out plan, but again, we need to disable this frontier dome before we can escape. And York's sitting there smiling again, saying, well, you're never going to get the password from me, and in that case we'll just have to hack it, one of them says. And then they're all like, well, don't underestimate the Vegapunks. You can see them there all at the computer typing away, sort of trying to decipher it themselves. They're all geniuses after all. If one of them can figure it out, then they can all figure it out, and somehow they're going to get it done. Then we see Vegapunk basically saying that, Lilith, I leave the command of the Vega Force 1 to you. There's another panel then sort of showing outside the lab, and they're all sort of running, and they're saying, let's move the ship to the other side of the Labophase. We do need to hurry though. The barrier might open any time now. One of them even says, you're right, though disabling it will allow us to escape, but that would mean they're going to be vulnerable to enemy fire as well. And one of them just like, yeah, that's exactly right. They're really on a race against time here. Just sort of got to get out of here as soon as they can. It's either they get out, they get away, or they don't get it in time, the Marines get in, and they'll be massively outnumbered. The next panel shows them all running, Luffy and Frankie and the others, and one of them says, well, look, to tell you the truth, I've never actually left the island before. And Frankie's like, hey, you know we're not going for a picnic. Luffy, obviously, his mind's about food loads of the time. If he's not thinking about fighting, he's thinking about food. So, of course, he's going to say, I'm definitely going to miss the food here. Bonnie's the same, saying same here. We won't get to eat any more of it tomorrow, so let's bring some more pizzas. We have cheese on the ship, so don't worry, Sanji can make us some. It's basically what Luffy tells her. They're always thinking about food, them two. I mean, are we really surprised at this point? Bonnie then is talking to them while they're running, basically saying that Sanji's a great man. He's so skilled at cooking, and at the same time he's so strong in battle. I think she's falling for him, to be quite frank. She really does like him. And then Luffy's saying, hey, why did you get in a good mood all of a sudden? It's sort of weird. And then I believe it's Frankie saying this and saying that I'll admit I'll feel better now that I've given up on killing Vegapunk. One of them says basically, good, we won't be annoyed by your crying anymore like last night. And he says, I wasn't crying. Then we actually cut back to the fleet out in the sea, and one of them's informing them that Rob Lucci's made contact. We know what's happening on the inside, relay this to everyone. It then cuts to Kizaru and Jay Garcia speaking together, and Jay's basically asking him, did you hear that, Borsalino? Calling Kizaru by his name as well. And he says, well, it's actually Kizaru speaking here, and says that basically Straw Hat was talking quite arrogantly to deceive us into believing that he has control over the whole situation, but it doesn't change the fact that they're cornered like rats. Jay then says the Frontier Dome is a defense system that utilizes lasers, right? Can't you just go through it since you're a light man? You did eat a light like devil fruit. And he does say that, yeah, that might be possible, but the one Vegapunk stationed to guard the dome is basically a friend of mine. And he says, Jay says back to him, well, you're just going to need to ignore him. And this next bit quite surprises me. He says that I can't ignore a man who's determined to fight for his duty. Doing that will go against my ideals. Now, this surprised me quite a bit because I've always thought Kizaru was sort of the kind, he just follows orders. You know, he does have his own sense of ideals, but he doesn't follow it strongly. He'll do what he's told. You know, the Navy is justice. If the Navy tells him to do something, he'll do it because that is justice. So that surprised me there as well. Then in the next panel, he does say to them that furthermore, if we start our assault now, then Sentomaru will surely order the Mecha Sea Beast weapons and the 50 pacifistas under his command to sink our fleet. And he says that basically the casualty is going to be enormous. Saturn wasn't really saying much in this bit, but he does sort of smack himself in the head. Well, I don't think he smacks himself in the head. I think he might be rubbing his head, and he just says, the situation's getting more and more complicated. What about the power plant? Do we know that's location? And then Kizaru, it looks like he's pointing to something on the paper or something. He says, Rob Lucci is quite the shrewd and cunning fellow. He already sent all the info we need. Then it cuts to the fleet, and they're all shouting, battle stations, battle stations. They're all preparing to go in by the looks of it. Then it cuts to one of the, I believe, Vice Admirals here saying, tell the Rokushiki users to be on standby. Our assault's going to begin soon. One of the Marines are just like, yes, sir. And then someone basically says, free all the CP0 agents from those pirates. Someone responds with, yes, man. The Tontali bombardment units. Remember, the bomb blast attacks don't work on the pacifistas, so aim for the Mecha Sea Beast weapons. Again, someone's like, yes, sir. In the next panel, we see them all running towards the Sunny. You can see Luffy and Frankie and a couple of others. And Luffy's just joking around by the look of it, saying, I love these Sky Island grounds. And Frankie's sort of joking about himself as well, saying, yeah, I get what you mean, but don't forget our goal, you know, don't forget the reason we're here. We've arrived at the Sunny. Then it cuts to Kizaru, him using one of his moves, Yata no Kagami, and then we see a pew. And by the looks of it, he sort of goes into the Sea Beast weapon, and then he's just bouncing from like machine to machine, bit to bit, using his devil fruit. There's a bit that says, let's go at it then. Now we do cut to Sentomaru, and he says, Ojiki, and then he gives an order to all pacifista units, saying all pacifista units obliterate all enemies. Then we can see Kizaru banging around himself, saying, prepare yourself, Sentomaru. Sentomaru as well is sort of stood there in his sort of stance, preparing his defense, and he does actually say that my defense is the toughest in the world, and bam, we see him clash Kizaru's ultimate devil fruit against Sentomaru's ultimate defense. It is interesting to see how this ends up. I do think Kizaru beats him, but it's a question of how hard does he have to work to beat him. Then it cuts to everyone at the Sunny, and one of them says, what's that? Basically, there's a light coming down from below, and then Luffy senses it. I mean, you can see he looks terrified here. He says, hey, someone very strong's coming. Now, this is shocking. I mean, he's just fought Kaido, he's just fought Big Mom, he's come out of Wano, he's fought some heavy hitters, and even Kizaru's presence alone is enough to scare him. Now, that is the end of the chapter. This was an amazing end to an amazing chapter. I mean, I just can't wait to see what happens next. I'll be sure to cover it as soon as I can, get that out to you guys. I just want to say thank you for everyone who's been watching. You know, thank you for all the support. I do really appreciate it. I do look through my comments and I will reply to as much as I can. Please, if you do enjoy the content, subscribe, and I'll definitely be out with some more. Okay, thank you guys, and peace out.